Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to do an unboxing of Great Battles of Julius Caesar, the recently released deluxe edition from GMT Games, designed by Mark Herman and Richard Berg. Now this game is a combination pack of the previous Caesar, the Civil Wars, released in 1994, and then Caesar Conquest of Gaul, released in 1996, and then reprinted in 2006. This is a big one. It's a combination pack of 2 games plus 8 other standalone scenarios for a total of 20 scenarios covering Roman military history from 100 BCE to about 50 CE. We've got 8 maps, 7.5 counter sheets, a lot of documentation and player aids. There is a lot to look at. Let's jump in, open this one up, take a look at the components, and offer some initial impressions. Couple general comments. We've got a 3-inch box, good bit of heft to it. There's some weight in here. Another one of these, value packs where they've packed more than 2 games into 1 game now. So these are good deals, I think, in terms of value for money spent there. Let's take a look at some of the general items on the back of the box here. Complexity is a 6. That feels about right. I might lean closer to a 5, but I've only spent about a half an hour with the rules and things like that, and they don't seem that overly complex. So that probably, feels about right, I guess. Solitaire suitability is a 7. That I think also feels right. There's no bot system, so if you're going to play this, solitaire, you're going to be playing both sides and going back and forth. But a really fun activation system, which I really think makes that type of solitaire system work, playing both sides in this way, because you're going to have some variance in terms of who gets activated and things like that. So yeah, these ratings feel good. It does say players 1 to 4, again, kind of acknowledging that it's good as a solitaire game. And then there's a wide variety of scenario sizes in here. We'll take a look at some of the bigger maps. There's 3 really big ones, and then there's a number of scenarios that are relatively small too. So that 2 to 9 hours, with the 9 hours being those bigger battles, I think probably feels about right. All right, let's get the cover off here and take a look at what's inside. We'll start with the rulebook here. A hefty rulebook indeed. So maybe that does make that 6 rating seem a little bit more accurate. 48 pages here, but as we do get to the back, we've got some credits and things like that. I think, I guess the rules do make up a good part of the 44 pages, 45 pages of the whole rulebook here. So, considering just with volume of rules and things like that, that 6 probably feels about right. Now, I do have some general observations here. It does mention in the beginning part, in the introduction, it says for those who have played SPQR, so it feels like there's quite a bit of an overlap between this system and the SPQR system, if you're familiar with that. So I think that would make the learning easier. And as I've looked through the rules and things like that, I feel like there's a lot of similarity to Men of Iron. Now, of course, Richard Berg designed the Men of Iron series, so that's, you'd expect some overlap here. But talking about things like, unit activation, zones of control, spacing is important, shock attacks, ranged fire, reaction fire. A lot of these systems feel somewhat familiar to me from having played and learned the Men of Iron system. Again, rulebook is matte paper, 8.5 by 11. We've got full color with, a good volume of text here. So kind of, reflecting on that 6 rating, I feel like the 6 is probably the right way to go here. So there we go. Very, very clearly written, looks really good. Of course, Mark Herman and Richard Berg, again, their design pedigree, very solid here, so you'd expect a good rule book. Now, the scenarios and things like that aren't in there. You get a whole another 80-page book here full of scenario information. So just a ton of sons. Now, here again is one of the larger ones. This is the Battle of Pharsalus. We'll take a look at these when we get the map out. We can see, you can see how this one's going to take a while to get through. And I believe this would be on the 22 by 50-inch map, because you're going to put 3 of the maps together to do this. And there are 3 big battles in here. So just a wide range of stuff that you can play, and each one has kind of its own map, and we'll take a look at those maps momentarily. So a lot of value in here. And again, just to remind it, we've got, here's the Caesar Civil Wars battle. This was its own game. Then Caesar Conquest of Gaul, and then 8 additional scenarios that I'm not sure where or how they were published, but they've been added in here as well for a grand total of 20 scenarios. So as we kind of look through this 80-page scenario book, we can see a lot of value here. I mean, the Men of Iron series is one of my favorite games, just flat out one of my favorite games. And I think that you know, as I look at this system and the depth of the value in this package, there's just a ton of gaming in here. This, you know, this, if you're on a budget, this is the type of game you want to get, right? Where you have, you know, just a ton of gaming in one. There's literally 20 games in the box, so it's just a lot of stuff to have fun with. Naval rules as well. There's a couple of scenarios, I think, at least 1 or 2 scenarios that are naval battles, which is pretty cool. And we'll take a look at some of those units as we look at the counters here. So again, this is the 12-page naval rule supplement for those scenarios. Most do not have naval units, but again, really neat that they put those in there as well. So very cool. And let's now take a look at our counters. So lots of stuff to look at here. We have 7.5 counter sheets, and I'll show close-ups as we go through these. But most of them, for example, this is the sheet 8 front. This is the half sheet that you get. These here are mostly markers, moved, you know, fatigue, missile low, and things like that, with the back sides to perform various different functions and things like that, on fire and things like that. So lots of interesting elements there. Now these are all 1/2 inch, and they're of course not rounded, so you're going to want to give your counter clipper a workout if you're going to clip these counters. And speaking of which, we do have some Cube for Me storage solutions in for this game. So I'm going to add a video after this, which is the Cube for Me challenge. Can we fit 7.5 counter sheets into the Cube for Me storage and then get these back in the box? So we'll be looking at that in a separate video. Now, this first sheet here, they've modeled, we've got leaders or one set of counters, then we have all, I think there's a good number, more than a dozen or so different Roman legions that are modeled in the game. And so I can see over here, this one, for example, looks like the 14th Legion. And so these units here belong to the 14th Legion, and they're marked. This is the 5th Legion. So they're actually, the specific legions are marked, which I think adds a pretty neat element of kind of historical twist to it that makes it more engaging and things. And again, both sides here are covered. Both sides, you know, double-sided. This look like we're going to have a step system where this is a weakened side for the unit. One thing about the scale and things like that too, just to help out, I know that each for unit size, if you're wondering, there is a size number here, which is that kind of left, the red 5 there, and I'll throw a close-up on these too. And that is the unit size. And the rules mention that each number of size is roughly 100 men. So this size 5 unit would be 500 people roughly. And there's some exceptions and things like that, but for the most part, that's the case there. Then turns are roughly 20 minutes, and each hex, as we look at the map, is roughly 70 yards across. So that might help a little bit with scale. And we have more. Here are some of our triremes. These are cool, or biremes, I guess they are. So we've got that, ships here. Then we've got all kinds of different and we start to get into still working through legions here too. So yeah, again, more ships down here. 7.5 counter sheets. That's a lot of stuff. I'll kind of go through these, and there's a lot of unique elements. So units down here, we have elephants down here in the bottom right-hand corner from Africa. So I'll show a close-up on those too. We got some more leaders here. Again, still working through some of the legions here as we're getting down even into the 3rd set. So yeah, lots of Roman units here. And these, I think, I'm not sure which ones these white ones are there. I'm not sure if those are Roman or not. Now we start to get into the opponents of Rome. We get Pontines, and we've got Numidians over here on the left, and tons of units. And these are, I think they're phalanxes. Is that what they would be? And these are long, these are cover 2 hexes. There's some special rules for those too. So lots of really kind of cool mechanics and cool features. We go on, sheet 5, Cimbri, Britons, and then Averni, so lots of opponents of Rome coming up in here. Lots of different kinds of units. We got, these look like slings using here. We've got more, just so much stuff. It's got mounted units, everything in here. Tons of stuff. Belgi, Germans, more Averni. Lots of stuff here. It's just a ton of, and now we get down to sheet number 7 here, our last one, mostly markers. We have some Parisi, so Parisians. There is a Battle of Paris, I think, in here too. And then we have more counters here that help with the regulation of combat. So there we go with that. Let's take a look now at our player aids. So there are a bunch of them here. And player aid number 1 talks about movement costs on one side, and there are 2 identical ones of these. So I'll put one off to the side. We'll take a look at these. Again, a lot of the information and charts that you'd need to execute combat Clash of Swords, so we have different, whether it's front, flank, or rear, kind of figuring out your combat kind of execution here. Shock superiority chart, shock combat results chart. Again, as I look at this, I'm not familiar with SPQR. I am familiar with Men of Iron, and I can see the design overlap between these, so I'm thinking if you know either of those two games, it's probably going to be a lighter lift than if you had been coming at this fresh here. Our second player aid, we've got Cohesion Hit and TQ Checks chart. And then in the middle here, this one looks like it focuses a lot on kind of the hierarchy of command and the execution of orders, and kind of just spending a little bit of time with the rules. It does seem like that command order and the structure of execution of orders and that hierarchy, especially of the legions, is quite is kind of a unique element of this game, and something that you're going to want to be able to do well at in order to be able to play the game effectively here. We've got some different stacking charts here to help with that information. So yeah, as I kind of look at these, I do see again that overlap with Men of Iron, but it does feel like it is a level more complex than Men of Iron on the whole here. Player aid number 3 is, again, we have 2 of these. I'll put one over here. Great Battles of Judah Leadership Checks chart, Leadership Casualty Table. How cool is this? The Die Roll of Doom. And it's right next to the Elephant Rampage table. I'm not sure that's coincidence, right? You gotta like any game that's got a Die Roll of Doom. That's just cool. So I wonder what that means. And then a sequence of play here. Lastly, we have naval charts and tables card. So for the naval battles there, that is 2-sided boarding table. So this is, again, this player aid is solely dedicated to the naval battles that are in the game. And then a route point tracking card. This looks like it's going to sit beside the maps there. And again, I think the way the time works in the game is that you play until one side routes. So you're building up a certain amount of route kind of damage to your opponent, and at a certain point, the enemy breaks, and that's when you've achieved victory. So there is, I think, a comment in there that although it is a game turn marker, the battles end with route, and this doesn't necessarily mean the end of a game. You're usually not playing against a time limit. Now our maps, and there are a lot of them in here. Well, let's go through baggies. Gotta love the baggies. And then we have a 10-sided die and 2 6-sided dice. So there we'll go. Now the maps here, I'm going to say are, I'll call them what I would say is functional more than elaborate, if that might be the right way to do it. So, you know, we've got some, here's the Battle of Pharsalus. This one here, this is the south map we can see on this. So Pharsalus is one of the ones that has and I'll show close-ups on a lot of these as we go, has a 22 by 50 inch map. And so that's going to be, this is 1/3 of the map that you're going to unfold and then put onto the other ones here. So I'm going to not look through, I think, all of these. We'll look through some of them. But as we go through, here is Thapsus, which involves a coast off the Africa there we get different forts and elements. But again, a lot of these, as you can see, there's not a ton of artistic emphasis, I'll say, put into these. These are very functional level maps that kind of make the terrain really clear. They're going to sit in the background, and the units, I think, are going to be the thing that's really going to create the visual pop with these battles as you start to play. And not necessarily a bad thing too, right? I think sometimes if you have a map that's overly designed, it can be a little bit tricky for gameplay in terms of kind of distinguishing that contrast between units and the map. So these strike me again as very functional. Bay of Biscay, this is all just water, a big one there. That's 22 by 34. Most of them seem to be 22 by 34. There are some shorter ones in here, some smaller ones that look like they're kind of in the 17 by 22 scale. So I'll show a couple more of these and then we'll leave up, but you get the kind of Munda. This is one here. So 45 BCE for this battle. This one is a 22 by 50. I know there's a south map for this one too. So again, very kind of soft palette design on these maps. All paper. I think they would benefit from plexiglass, as you're going to have some fold creases and things like that. But again, with 7.5 maps in here, you kind of get the rationale behind one, just to make them fit in the box and to kind of fit them all in as paper maps. So we have more here. We keep going through. I think the actual number of maps is 7 full-sided ones, and then so 7 that are 22 by 34 as they fold out, and then 1 that's a smaller 17 by 22, I believe it is. That's a solo map there too. So we can see we got forts, lots of different terrain elements though, for sure. And that's why it's nice to see these unique maps for each battle. So even though you're going to be fighting a bunch of different battles, and the maps themselves are rather kind of a softer design emphasis, we do kind of realize that, okay, each battle has its own unique map, which is really kind of cool. I did also notice that some of the hexes here are of a different size. Like if we look at this one here, and then we compare this is definitely bigger on this map. So some of the ones have a smaller hex scale as well as others. I'm not sure if that's a consideration as you kind of make a purchasing decision, but there's only a couple that seem like they have, these look slightly over a ½ inch, where the others look closer to 3/4 of an inch across. So still probably the same scale, it's just a matter of fitting everything into the maps here. Okay. We have one here of the Rhine, and then we are done. Each one of these two, I should say, each map is double-sided, so not only do you have all of the maps there, you have the double-sided element as well. That brings us to the end of our unboxing. Be curious to hear what you think about it. Let me know in the comments down below. I am looking forward to getting this one to the table as soon as I work through some of the backlog of current games and things like that. But next, if you're wondering about a storage solution for the 7.5 counter sheets that are in this game, I'm going to go now and I'm going to punch out all the counters, I'm going to clip all the counters, and then we're going to see if they can fit inside Cube for Me's storage solution for this game. Separate video, I'll put a link to it right here. So let's see how Julius Caesar versus Cube for Me does. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.